Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a special guest who's super creative and multifaceted. Max is not only talented in comic writing, but he's also a skilled drummer who brings rhythm and storytelling to life. His passion for both art forms led him to create captivating comics that resonate with his readers, all while keeping the beat alive with his drumming skills. In this episode, we'll dive into the world of comic creation, exploring the inspirations behind his work, the challenges of bringing characters to life, and how his love for drumming influences his storytelling. Whether you're a fan of comics, music, or both, this conversation is packed with insights into the creative process and the pursuit of artistic passions. Let's welcome Max, a true creative force in both visual and musical world. So
Hey.
welcome, Max.
How are you? Thanks for having me, man. That's a lofty intro. That's a lot to live up to.
Oh, but that's true, I guess.
A lot of pressure. The pressure's on.
Yeah. That's why I did that intro, to put pressure on you.
Keep me on my toes.
That
I
was
gotcha.
intentional. Exactly.
All right. Let's do it.
Yeah. So what inspired you to start writing your comics?
Well, listen. I guess for the answer to that, we have to go way back to when I was a kid, because I've been drawing and making comics pretty much since I can remember. Kind of on and off, there were some more intense periods there when I was a kid. And then, as a teenager, I kind of veered off and came back to it. But I've always been drawing and creating little strips, mostly humor stuff when I was a kid. So reading comics as well inspires you generally. I always like to draw, and then discovering comics and stuff, it was a fun way of incorporating drawing and stories as well. And I always enjoyed writing generally as well. So even, back in school when my friends would bitch about, in language classes where we had to write essays and stuff, I actually enjoyed it and tried to, create stories that were interesting, at least to me, hopefully. And I always enjoyed that process. So just from a very young age, putting words and pictures together seemed very natural.
Yeah, when you were a kid, which one was your favorite character in comics? Or in cartoon?
I guess it depends. Like if you're asking me when I was like a kid, really young, it kind of started more with cartoons, I guess, Transformers and He-Man and stuff. But back then they were, I learned later on that there were certain laws that you couldn't promote toys and things like that on TV to kids in the 70s. And then in the 80s, there were these laws were taken away. So a lot of the stuff that I saw as a kid is commercially based. So as much fun as it was, with He-Man and Transformers, they were smart. They had toys, they had cartoons, they had comic books. Eventually they had movies, So as a kid in the 80s, at least, it was all around. And I loved all that, the big muscle guys, the barbarians, the movies of those times, the movies like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Conan, Commando, all that kind of stuff, right? The machismo kind of hero of the 80s and early 90s. That's what was around when I was a kid. That's what I enjoyed. And so I guess my favorite character as a kid was probably He-Man.
Wow.
And as I got older, favorite character is tough. I mean, there was a period where I really liked Batman, but after years and years, maybe because I'm getting old, of seeing lots of Batman stories and things repeated, I find he's a bit stale, and a lot of tropes just kind of get repeated a lot. Today, I guess the heroes I'm more interested in are sometimes more created independently, more offbeat, or parodies of the heroes of our youth. What I find interesting now is you have this whole movement of bootleg comics, that some guy's just going to do a Batman story, and it's going to be maybe a little bit sick and twisted, or, something you've thought about Batman at some point where you're like, well, Batman, in the real world, maybe he'd be more of a psycho or something, and someone does that story, That's more interesting to me now than seeing the same old Batman stuff.
Yeah, Batman is probably, I think, mine also favorite one.
He's listen, I'm an artist, so all artists will say he's out of all the superheroes, he's probably the coolest visual, and the funnest to draw, and the one you can do a lot with the shape and the silhouette and stuff. So from an artistic point of view, I totally get Batman. But yeah, I'm more, as I get older, I'm more into more offbeat stuff. Maybe even if we're talking about superheroes, there's this TV show called The Boys that's also based on a comic book,
Hmm.
where superheroes are more like celebrities and they get involved, unfortunately, in dastardly things, and the whole celebrity culture behind the scenes applied to superheroes. That I find interesting. It's like a new spin on it, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah. So, how's your journey been? How many years has been you're doing your
Well, like I said, I've been doing it on and off, so obviously not super serious stuff, but I still have old comics I did as a kid lying around. Some I did as a teenager. I studied in visual arts and specifically comic book concentration in university. So I produced some stuff in around like my late teens, early 20s. And then after that, life kind of got in the way. I kept up with university and became actually a visual arts teacher. Uh, Through the years, didn't really make comic books per se so much, but I always kept drawing. Always would do like a pin up here, an illustration there. Working in a high school, I had a lot of chances in my classes. Obviously, I was the art teacher who would actually show you and draw on the board and show you the techniques that I know about. And obviously the school, when there was Halloween posters and things like that, they would ask me to create an illustration. So I always kind of kept up the skills, but comic book specifically is a little different than just regular illustration. It takes a lot more work in planning and discipline and patience is what
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
say, compared to
100%.
just doing illustrations, right?
Right. So now you have 12 books, right?
Oh, basically the my main series, Big Baby, which I'm wearing the shirt, I have 13 issues, which I kind of consider volume one. That's like my when I started making comics again. I mean, we could talk. I can talk more specifically about that. Like the last period's been very creative in the last few years because going through COVID in the early months where we just got to kind of stay home. I'm not the type to just kind of sit around and not do anything, and there were a few things at that time that I wasn't happy with. I wasn't happy that I wasn't producing more art. I wasn't happy with my body physically, getting old, getting a little fatter, and things like that. So, with the time off, I said it would be ridiculous to just sit around and still not do anything and still just get fatter. So that's, where I decided to hit the gym again and start actually producing comic books more seriously again. And it is the most far spanning project I've done up to date, obviously. I did decide to start, I started with issue one. I can show, this is
Yeah.
the first issue I produced, right? And that came out 2021. And I actually started working on the series in 2020, April, because how comics, the nature of comic books, their periodicals, or at least the way I wanted to present them is as the same ideas when I was a kid, where they come out regularly, either every month or every 2 months or something like that. That was the model I wanted to follow. So I figured if I start with just the first issue, 12 pages, keep it simple, one story, produce that, attain that goal. It took a while. And I even waited to publish it because then I said, I need to have issue 2 and 3 in the can as well before I put out issue 1. Excuse me. So I have a bit of leeway. It doesn't catch up to me, and I respect all my deadlines, because the most important thing for this, the production, again, is the discipline, the patience, and making sure you hit those personal deadlines, because I'm an indie creator. I don't have an editor or a boss. I got to kick myself in the ass basically to produce the material. So having been able to hit kind of that first milestone of doing a 12-page issue, I did a second one, and then I just kept going. And each issue was kind of self-contained, but as I moved along, the kind of story developed. So kind of a long answer to say that I have 13 issues, and that's what I kind of consider volume one. And I did that all in one kind of big breath of, I guess, 3 years in total to get all that out. Just about 2.5 years, 3 years. And took a break with issue 13. But I want to get back to it because I really enjoy Big Baby. It's like the series where I can just pretty much do anything I want, get my frustrations out, and the storyline was starting to evolve and get a little more, like I said, the first few issues were self-contained, but then there was a bit of continuity that was moving that you would know from other issues. Then I started doing longer arcs, so like a story that's 2 issues instead of just one, and it just evolves kind of organically from there, which is nice.
Yeah, I've seen in the in the beginning you started with 12 pages, and in the middle you started having like 24 pages comic books, right?
Yeah, that's it. Like I the way it actually happened was it was just a marketing scheme. I don't know how successful it was, but I had basically drawn issue 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? They were all 12-page stories, but then for number 3, it was coming out right before Christmas, right? Early December. So I was like, just try to maybe work in some sort of Christmas gimmick. So there's no Christmas story, but I did a Christmas cover, right? And basically what I did is I took what were to be issue 3 and 4 and combined them into one for that first, 24-page special, but that's basically just two 12-page stories, right? So I cheated a little bit. I don't know if it's cheating. It's still 24 pages. But that inspired me later on in the series when I got to number 9 the next year for the next Christmas. Then I did an actual 24-page story. And again, we talked about this before where it's like, you start with a smaller goal, and then doing a 24-page story once you've done it doesn't seem quite as crazy. Right. So then as the series progressed, there was a few, like I knew the last issue would be pretty big, issue 13. And actually issue 12 was supposed to be the last issue, but then the story got a little bit bigger and I decided to do issue 13. And I have this weird thing with the number 13. Most people consider it very unlucky. I'm the opposite, right? I don't know. At the gym, I always take number 13, It's things like that. Yeah, I go against the grain
locker,
somehow.
You mean the locker?
Yeah.
The locker number.
I always have number 13. And coincidentally, number 13 is often not taken, right?
Not taken by... That's funny.
So I kind of like the idea that it would end on 13. It's kind of my personal little thing with number 13. And I was able to issue 12. I threw in 2 or 3 more pages because the story demanded it. And then when I got to the last issue, I was thinking 24, but it actually ended up being 30. Not even a standard number. Like usually it's 32, but actually I got to 34 pages on that one. So my next goal is like 48 pages. I'd like to hit with the story. Yeah. At some point.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Like you mentioned that you take smaller steps first, then you build upon it, and then everything becomes easy for you. In the beginning, it's
easier, or at least manageable, right? Because there's always other challenges that kind of spring up that you have to apply the same principle to. It's as much as it'd be fun to it's getting easier and easier and easier, and then this is hard. Now it's less hard and getting easier, and then there's going to be something else after that, right? So, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So, what's your creative process of when you're developing a new comic? What's your creative process? Do you start by script writing first, or character building first, or just a general?
It depends on the project, I guess. And to me, there's no right or wrong way of doing that, especially for comics. Some people write a whole script before, some people just do sketches. Whatever is motivating you and inspiring you first, I guess, is what I'd say. So for me, I can talk about the new series that I'm working on now. I started doing, and even Big Baby, you always start with sketches because I'm like, Big Baby, I don't know what the character looks like. So I tried a few different iterations, different looks and stuff, at a certain point he had no nose. Like there's just little things like that. And then you just kind of narrow it down. But with Big Baby, I was looking for something pretty simple and classic. And from there, a lot of the storytelling for me started with what are called thumbnails, which is basically, instead of comic pages, I don't know, about this size, and usually you draw bigger. Well, you draw on a little rectangle like this, right? Oh, where are my fingers? There. Yeah. So just that's why they're called thumbnails. They're about the size of a thumb. And you draw your pages very quickly, sketchy, but just to see if the composition works, if the storytelling works, the reading flow. And then usually from there, I would blow those up, put a page on top, do a quick pencil, like tighter pencils, more detailed, but not all the shadow and all the feathering and the finished detail, just the structure. And then from there, I like working on a light table. So I'll throw that on the light table. It throws light behind it. I put the final sheet on top that I do the final inking on. And that way, because traditionally what they do after the inking is they erase the pencils. This way I avoid that, and I find it just keeps for a final page, it's very clean and efficient. So that's generally the process for Big Baby. Where I've gone a bit different with the next story I'm working on. The idea is that it's a finite story, 4 or 5 issues. I still haven't decided, but basically what I did is I just wrote out the plot, as it was coming to me, as I would write, back when I was in high school, kind of fleshing out the story, the major beats. No dialogue, just this happens and then this happens, and because of this they have to do that, and you kind of work it out. And I think that's smart for that kind of story. I took a tip from this pro comic book writer who I think has done a lot of good work. His name's Mark Millar. Sorry, it's written Mylar, but you actually pronounce it Miller because he's Scottish. But he says that no matter what, all of his stories, he always knows the end, right? Before anything else. He almost comes up with the end first, because he explains that as you're writing the story, if you know the end, you can plant those little, seeds and interesting bits that make stories in movies or narratives and whatever kind of media more interesting, right? In comics as well, where you can, those moments where you can, you're like, oh, that's why that guy had a blue shoe, or something like that.
So that's interesting. So he first set up his goal, like what is the end result he wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Then
he's basically, he obviously, sometimes the germ of the idea can be the middle of the story. Sometimes it can be the beginning, sometimes it can be the end. So it might not always be the end right first, but as soon as he kind of starts developing, he's like, okay, I really got to figure out the end, and a cool end or an interesting end. And if you have that, it's just, he says it's much easier after that just to make events move towards that, right? Because you know where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Like which direction you want to go, then you just build it up.
And those subplots that you're throwing in really pay off at the end.
Right. And what about you? You start from the beginning or from the end as well?
Well, that's for Joe. I'll just say that the project is a Joe Rogan parody, so it's called Joe Rogan.
Oh, it's gonna be funny.
I hope so. It is obviously, like I said, it's an action comic, like kind of superhero-ish, but parody, right? So with Joe Rogan, we're talking about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. We're talking about.
We're talking about where do you start?
The writing process. So I kind of had the overall idea of him as kind of a superhero with these other political figure, or more podcast figures, I guess, generally, who are part of a team, surrounding Joe. And that was kind of the germ of the idea. But as I kind of, decided to bring things in from the real world, from politics, and what's going on, at least recently, the end just came to me, right? Okay. And I had the idea, and I remembered this whole thing that this writer Mark Millar had said. So I was like, yeah, okay, I really like that end, and it really worked well, because as I was writing the plot, just like I said earlier, it was leading right to where I wanted it to, and it seemed like things were falling into place. And some of those little subplots, like I said, sometimes too, it's something you throw in for fun in the beginning, and then near the end, you need a solution for a certain thing, and you think back and you're like, oh, that thing's going to turn into this. I just don't want to spoil it, but I have a specific situation in mind that happened while I was writing. But basically, again, another long-winded answer, I write out the plot with the ending in mind, however long it takes. Usually it's maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs per issue, something like that. And then what I did after that is I break it down to the number of pages, those little thumbnails. And the first set of thumbnails, I just write what needs to happen on that page, okay? Joe and the gang get from the restaurant to the laundromat or something. That's what needs to happen on this page. The next page, at the laundromat, the lady says this, and I just break it down. Again, with this, I did like 4 issues, and then I realized I had to have 5. So it ended up being 5 issues. So I break it all down that way. And then the next step is to go do thumbnails again, but then visually, and then decide how many panels for Joe and the gang to get from the restaurant to the laundromat, depending on what happens along the way. Yeah. And then once you break that down, once you break that down, then you have to do pencils, just like I did on Big Baby. So this has a bit more steps, and then inking after that.
And you do all those steps by yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when
Well,
you're not a professional, to work as a team on comics is got to be pretty difficult. I know some people do it, but the coordination and finding the right people as well, it's not
mm,
always obvious. I have a friend who draws and produces comics. He's a cartoonist. He writes and draws as well. And he started drawing his own stories because he would always try with other artists to get them on board to draw his stories. They would always kind of fall through and it never happened. So he just pushed himself to learn to draw. And he already had a bit of
okay.
skills and stuff, but he's, I can say over the course of his miniseries that he's worked on, he's really improved just from doing it, right? Who would have thought
Yeah,
practice makes you better? But that's generally how it works.
exactly. So how do you come up with these ideas, like this character? So, for example, Big Baby.
Sure.
How do you think about that? Like, okay, now I'm gonna have this character. How do you do that?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, this is like, how do you conceive of it, I guess? Yeah. Well, originally when I was going to start, because before I actually started producing comics in 2020 during COVID, I had been filling sketchbooks with tons of ideas for this epic story that I have. It's very space surreal. There's 7 worlds and it's like epic. And I realized I'll never get this done if I start with this. It's too much, right? It's too daunting. So Big Baby was like, I just want to have something that's, fun and simple.
Simple.
Right. And then, just like I said, just to start off, I should
Yeah.
just start off with 1 issue, 12 pages. That was kind of the idea, even before the character came out. And I'm like, maybe I can do a comic more kind of in the independent spirit, underground kind of spirit, where it's a bit of the author, but I bring in the superhero aspect that I liked from my youth with the character of Big Baby. Because basically, Big Baby is me. Right? In the comic, I'm in the comic you change the name, but he basically looks like me, the kind of main character.
Even bold. He's bold as well.
Big Baby is, yeah.
Yeah.
But the main character before he becomes Big Baby. So Big Baby is my alter
Oh.
ego, and well, here, I'll show you real quick, because in that first issue, it just literally starts, right? So if you recognize that guy, right?
Ooh.
So... It's a secret. No, I'm just kidding. So
Now I know.
yeah. So that explains it. So issue was basically because it was during COVID, and I said I'm just gonna talk about in these short stories things that frustrate me in life or that annoy me or just get some of that venom out a little bit about certain subjects or whatever. And at that time was staying in and everyone needs to get vaccinated and this and that, and listen, I did not want to get vaccinated. I am not vaccinated, so during that period I had a lot of frustration towards that situation, lockdown and all that. So that's basically the story of issue 1. If I can, because it's 12 pages, I'll go quickly and kind of explain, but he's kind of been caught by the police, he's been sent to jail
Because of vaccination.
I don't say it explicitly. It just,
Yeah, okay.
I hint at it, and because of the time when it came out, it's probably pretty obvious. But in the logic of the story, it doesn't have to be that necessarily. I left that to the imagination of the reader. I guess you
Imagination
could
of
say.
the right.
Yeah, because
Right.
there's like a conversation he's going to have with his cellmate where you kind of clue you in if you know what's going on, right? Because he meets his cellmate, this guy here, right? So he's like, "What are you in for, son?" So he says, "Got caught outside past curfew." So I never explicitly talk about lockdown, but there's that sense. So he's obviously he's like well, you, and he's like voluntary. So he's on voluntary lockdown, right? And
Okay.
so can't follow the rules. Is that it? What's wrong with you, son? Won't get in line? Not willing to comply? What are you? A big baby? And this is the first issue, right? So that's
Right.
it's almost like if there was an introduction to the show, if there was a
Yeah,
show,
setting
this
the
would
tone.
be it. You know what I mean? I'm basically setting up the concept, right? That's why I think
Right.
it's just easier for me to go through this and explain it real quick. So, he's yelling in his face, and in spite of COVID and the all the rules, he's spitting all over him and stuff, So he's like, here's, obviously been kind of drenched, and that's where the alter ego comes out. So here his jaw kind of opens up and Big Baby comes out and grabs our guy here. So Big Baby is it's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, He can do the things that we can't do in polite society.
Oh, okay.
So kicks
Got
this
it.
guy out of the cell here and continues to wreak havoc basically in the prison. real quick. So here's, the shot where he's establishing himself, his kind of introduction.
Nice.
He's also very verbose. He's not like a big dumb guy. He's got a pretty good vocabulary. So here he's stating, he's like, there can be only one alpha. Clearly, sir, an alpha you are not. So he's very machismo, obviously. So here the other police officer starts shooting him. And you see the point of view here from inside his mouth where he just bites his head off. So there's a little bit of gore, but it's pretty cartoony. It's not, I think, too over the top. At least not in this issue. So yeah, and this is basically, Big Baby giving us his philosophy here. So at the end, it gets a little crazy, a little more surreal, because he's in the prison. All of a sudden, he's on a mountaintop, and all of a sudden, he's like flying through space. Because he can't be contained is kind of the idea, right? So what he's saying is the dialogue is, mere walls cannot contain me. Man was not meant for a cage. Limits are not set by a city, a country, or a continent. My domain, the universe. So it's very over the top, right? I like to go use hyperbole and go a little insane, And at the end, he's just, talking to the reader. If I could read that. When the rights of the individual are upheld, so go the rights of all. Submission to authority will never be a feasible option. Liberty or death. It's pretty intense. That's how I was, sure. It's a good snapshot of how I was feeling at the time,
Right. Yeah.
Like I said, as crazy and as cartoony and different contexts that the story can take place, every issue, like I told you, all the stuff that comes from real life, right, from my life, that's basically what gets worked into this. With the Joe Rogan series, it's more secondary offhand, where I'm, listening to podcasts and listening to politics and things like that, incorporating that to that story. This with Big Baby is always a little bit more personal, even though if you don't know, you don't need to know that to appreciate the story.
Yeah, so basically what I see is, according to the trend, you release that kind of story. In COVID, you released a story related to freedom and all that stuff, because there was so
restrictions
restrictions imposed.
Yeah.
And now there's a political scene going on, right? Especially in states. So you're releasing according to the trend, and I think that's the great strategy, actually.
Well, it's I guess right now, because the elections are coming up, it is very trendy to talk about that. But it's something I've always been interested in. So I luck into the fact that it's like, I'm conscious of it. When I kind of came up with this Joe Rogan series or Rogan series, I figured maybe this has a bit more chance for mainstream appeal, but it's still a little kind of offbeat and off kilter and through my psyche. So it's a little odd, I'm sure, to some people. But yeah, I mean, definitely there's a bit of a marketing ploy behind that. But I am interested in creating the story. If it was completely something that doesn't interest me, but I'm doing just because it's popular, I wouldn't do that. Joe Rogan is always, I've listened to his podcast for years. I'm not like, oh my God, Joe Rogan is our hero or anything like that. He himself says he's not, right? So I like his open-mindedness and the variety of guests and people that he's willing to talk to on his show, as opposed to sometimes more mainstream media where of course, you rarely hear opposing voices on a show that's maybe right wing or a show that's maybe left wing, right? So
yeah, that show is like you learn a lot of stuff from the guest he brings in, and also the questions are really amazing. So I mean, that's always good to gain knowledge from wherever we can, right?
Well, that's it. And I mean, there's some episodes where I don't learn that much, where there's a guest where I'm like, I don't really like this guy, or I don't agree with him or stuff. But that's fine. Like, sometimes you need to hear opposing viewpoints to
both perspectives,
different perspectives. And sometimes it just reinforces why you think something. You're like, yeah, this person, it makes me want to believe in what I believe even more because I don't agree with what they're saying, sometimes by opposition.
Right. All right. So, how do you balance the art and the writing aspect of comic? Do you sometimes collaborate with other artists as well?
An actual collaboration, I don't think I've done yet. Maybe a little bit in university back in the day, but nothing I would want published. But not for any kind of obscene material or anything like that, just for the level and the quality of the art. But I I guess the only collaboration I've done up to this point is one of my friends is preparing an anthology comic, and that's basically a comic where there's many short stories, more than likely by different creators. So I did a kind of weird, quick, short 4-page story for that. But again, it's generally, as a cartoonist, anyways, if you're doing both, it's kind of a solitary job, and part of it is kind of, I like that, I guess is what I would say, because not having to, I can be a team player, but not having to always deal with other people is for me, I feel makes me more productive. It's just me. I know I can count on myself. I know I can kick myself in the ass when I need to work a bit harder or push on something to get it done for a certain time. There are people, friends I have that I can rely on, just generally in life, not artists necessarily, but to trust that on an artistic level. I did try, maybe a little less than a year ago, I tried a collaboration with an inker in another country, and it didn't quite work out. I won't go into the details. So that was kind of like, you know what, I'll try it, and if I lose out here, it's not a huge loss.
Yeah.
I'm going to trust people. I'm going to test the waters. It didn't work out, so I just reinforced my idea. Just keep doing it on your own, at least for now. That being said, though, I do have kind of my community of friends that I've discovered here in the area in Montreal, in the outskirts. There's about 6 or 7 of us that we kind of meet regularly. We do a Zoom meeting about once a month, just to keep talking about our projects, encouraging each other. And those guys are all producing very well and pretty solid when it comes to that. So, if at some point there was a collaboration with those guys, I'd be way more open to it, because they've proven themselves, right? They have a track record, right?
Yeah, and also like exposing yourself to your tribe, to look up to people who are in your field and doing great, it always pushes you up as well. Like they said, whoever you spend your most time with, you become like that person, right?
Well, absolutely, yeah. And, like, not to get too extreme, but yeah, if you're hanging around with a bunch of losers, more than likely, unfortunately, they're probably going to pull you down rather than, like you said, push you up or pull you up, right? I guess is maybe a better analogy. Yeah, for sure.
What?
No, and because of that solitary aspect, which has good sides to it, like I said, in the productivity department, but bad sides as well, because, spending a lot of time alone at the drawing board. So to meet up with those guys once in a while and talk about the same problems we encounter when we're working and the same insecurities about our art and all that stuff, right? It's it helps us all keep us all motivated, right?
Right. And also, like, sometimes they bring in different issues that they are facing, and then you collaborate on solving, give a solution who have already gone through that particular path.
Absolutely, yeah, and we help each other out with, when it comes down to just the practical stuff of producing a comic. Eventually, when you want to print it and stuff. I started Big Baby right away. I wanted, again, to have control over everything, so I figured out a way to make it at home on a printer. It was black and white. Like, I did everything so the production could be done by me, and I could handle all of it and learn how it really works, and then push forward and stuff. So I've had a comic printed since then. But, like, one of our friends has a great print shop that he's been going to for years, so he suggested it to everyone, and now everyone's benefiting from better printing rates, so just that is for a guy producing independent comics, that's huge. If you can save 10 cents on producing a comic, it's a good thing when you're printing up.
For sure.
Most of us print up 100 to 200 copies every time, independent comics. So that's sometimes, depending on if it's not just black and white, if it's color, that can end up being a few $1,000s.
Yeah, that's expensive, the colored ones, for sure.
Oh, as soon as you put color, the price jumps up.
Yeah. So are you planning to release any colored ones as well?
Well, that's the plan for the next series for Joe Brogan. That will be my first colored series. Yeah. So black and white obviously is just very practical at the beginning. It's colors one whole step you don't have to worry about. And I can do color, but color automatically means a comic takes just about twice as long to produce. Because you'll spend anywhere from 6 to 12 hours on a page to ink it, depending on the level of detail. You've already spent a few hours penciling it before that,
right?
And then coloring is probably another 6 to 8 hours.
Coloring, plus you need to think about which color should I use. So that's like also,
well, that's it. I mean,
brainstorming.
Color can be daunting because there's so many options, right? So sometimes you got to just like when you produce a comic, you got to decide on a basic template for most things. Color's another one where you're like, okay, I'm just using these 8 colors. You know what I mean? Because if you start going into like, oh, I have 256 colors, it's gonna look like a mess, and it's gonna be just, it's not gonna be what you want, basically. And you're never gonna finish it. Probably that's also what's gonna happen. So there's certain limits and parameters that it's smart to give yourself for a particular project or a particular book, right? When you're making comics.
Yeah, you mean like limit your choices, so that
Yeah,
it's
even
easier
just
to.
like when you first start out, you're like, what? I have to make a template, and all my pages have to be the same portion, and like you got to think of printing formats, right? Because if you have an odd format, well, that's gonna cost more when you go to print, and it's all these things. So you start, if you're smart, you start with standard formats and page sizes and things, so that way already when you go to print, it's cheaper. There's a reason there's those standards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's readily available, those standard sizes, and also it's easier to print.
It's always what's going to be easier, it's
Right.
and it's cool to be creative and come up with crazy different formats, and that's possible, but it's going to be more expensive, right? So there's a give and take
Trade-off.
in everywhere, at every level in the production. It's like some pages you're like, yeah, I could spend 5 days on this instead of 2, but at some point I got to move on and get the next page done.
Right.
It's always
So,
that,
like,
yeah. Sorry, just
trade-off.
grappling between like art and efficiency, I guess I would put it.
Right. Yeah. So, how do you approach sensitive or complex topics in your?
I tend to just barrel through pretty with like, stuff that I might think is going to be controversial or whatever, is like, listen, I think I've always kind of been excuse the term, but a shit disturber, going against the grain. So if I think it's going to maybe offend some people, it usually makes me want to do it even more. Like, in issue 2 of Big Baby, it was, I was playing with the trope of going on a flight, right? Just having to get there early, waiting in line, like all the annoying things about going to catch a flight, right? So just all the obvious stuff, the stereotypes, and, they're on the plane and there's a baby crying, right? And we've all had the thought of like, if I could just, shut that baby up or whatever. So in the story, Big Baby basically, this is a weird reference, but this story about plane disasters I saw on this TV show years ago, where this Air Canada plane, there was a crack on the side, and as it was flying, part of the roof just like, ripped open, and everyone was like, ah, like 600 miles an hour in the wind in their face and stuff, but the airplane didn't break. So they were actually, because of the aerodynamics that was keeping the shape of the plane, they were able to actually land safely and all that, right? But it's like, imagine if a plane all of a sudden has a sunroof, just one piece that kind of flew off. So I don't know why, but I incorporated that in the story, because in the story, Big Baby's on the plane and he's stressed and he can't take it anymore with all the people, and he's been sitting next to two fat people who are eating, and it's falling all over him, and all the worst situations you can encounter in an airplane. So he says, I need some air, and he rips open the roof like that, right?
Yeah.
And then the baby starts crying again, so he finds the baby and basically just throws it out of, the airplane. So things like that, I think some people will probably be turned off by, but, I think it's funny. I wouldn't literally throw a baby out of an airplane, obviously, but to do it in a comic book, why not?
Right.
I think there's an aspect to it of almost like stand-up comedians. To me, the people who talk about the most messed up things are not the people doing those messed up things. If they're talking about it and in a humorous context, I'd be very surprised if they actually do those things. They wouldn't talk about it, right? Again, I think the people who do those things probably don't talk about it openly.
Yeah, because they have guilt in.
Yeah, exactly.
If somebody's not talking about something, that there's some guilt inside them that's stopping them to
or they know
speak
that it
about
might be seen as wrong, or exactly.
Right, that also.
Me throwing a baby out of an airplane in a comic book doesn't hurt anyone, will never hurt anyone, will never hurt a baby. I will never throw a baby. It's not a sign that I want to do that in real life, but some people take it that way, I guess, or might be offended by that. But yeah, no, and he basically ends up crashing the plane and killing everyone aboard. So that's issue 2.
Okay. but he survived.
Yeah, of course, yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's again,
So
that's the beginning when I was just doing those one shot kind of stories, and the story ends, and it just we don't really, I did later on in way later issues. I hadn't planned on this, but the last time you see the baby, the plane's flying, and you just see him in the background, like, hey, falling to his death. Later on in issue 11, I brought him back as another character. He's been changed because when he fell to Earth, he fell through the anus of hell, straight into hell. So he didn't just crash into the Earth. The anus of hell opened up, and he was shot into hell. And then he became, his name is the Sinfant. So he's like a satanic baby.
demon,
Yeah, demon baby. Yeah. So like I said, just anything, stupid body humor, like I said, anuses and things like that. I'll throw that in there if I think it's funny, It's like when I make a bad joke with my girlfriend and she says it's not funny, I always tell her, as long as I think it's funny and I'm laughing, that's all that matters.
True.
It amuses me, and if it amuses other people, great. If it offends a few people, it's still kind of fun.
Right. Yeah, I think there's always audience for...
As long as you take it as parody and humor, because that's all it is. You know what I mean? It's, that parallel with stand-up comedy, it's like, they're jokes. That's all, I just thought it was funny that he goes through the anus of hell. I had a weird idea, and I drew it. Sometimes, I think about some of the things I've done in the comic. I'm like, how can I take the stupidest idea I've had, but, make it work? And, when I show my girlfriend, and she has a good sense of humor, she's like, yeah, that's, that works out. I'm like, okay. Because most ideas, before you follow through on them, just seem dumb. You're like, oh, that's dumb. No one would be interested in that. But if you actually follow through and do it, I was pretty proud of some of those dumb ideas.
Yeah, sometimes you look back and see, you really feel, oh yeah, I was thinking that it's not good, but it's really nice and people are liking it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think any idea you have is worth developing. If you have the idea and you had just the feeling or the impetus real quick that it could be funny or entertaining, it's just right after that where the insecurity comes in. It's like, no, I can't do that, or people won't think that's cool, or people will think it's stupid, or and it's like, I'm like, maybe it is stupid, but maybe that's what's fun about it. So let's see it through,
Yeah, that's what comics are about, I guess.
I love stand-up comedy, and I love, when they go really far, and things that would offend most people, I don't get offended. I can't think of anything that would actually offend me, because it's the context. I know the context. That anything goes in that context to me.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Context is super important. Yeah. So like you mentioned, audience. What is your target audience? Do you have the set of mind? Do you have a persona for?
I mean, I think it's important as an artist. Most artists will say this, where it's like the levels of art. I mean, this is maybe just my opinion. Others have the same opinion, and others have different opinions. But the difference between maybe commercialism and art and where that happens, I definitely think I start off by wanting to satisfy myself, and I'm the audience. I'm treating myself as the audience. Like I said, is this idea too stupid or this or that? But I think it's good. So let me, follow through on it. Maybe people will be interested. That's the mindset of most people who are making movies, and they come up with something we've never seen before. Hopefully, if it's original and stuff. So it's not a tested idea. You don't know, but you hope you're like, I think it's interesting, so I hope other people possibly will as well. If we're talking about a target audience, I would assume the target audience is guys kind of like me. I mean, and there's not a lot of us, we're not the majority for sure. But when it comes to the philosophical kind of mindset, maybe the somewhat political mindset, I think it's people who are maybe a little more individualistic, who like to rely on themselves, who like to get things done by themselves. We met through meeting at the gym. So I tend to find, I've noticed that people I meet at the gym who I see regularly tend to be like that as well. You know what I mean? Like the discipline and the go-getting. And I mean, we're not perfect. Sometimes we falter and, we take an off day or we get lazy. But I mean, most people I see fairly regularly at the gym, I feel probably have kind of the same mindset. So maybe people like that, maybe more guys than girls, but I don't think girls would necessarily be pushed off by anything in my comic. I do have a female character later on in the series who shows up, who's based on a person in my real life. who's kind of a superhero kind of character, or at least a character who has powers herself. So actually, I could show you. She's featured here on the cover real quick. This is like a homage to the movie. Why the name escapes me? Silence of the Lambs. There we go. So that's the movie poster, and I worked in Big Baby. But real quick, yeah, you see her a little bit here, over here, and I don't say it explicitly, but this city is Montreal.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
You'll recognize some landmarks there.
That's a surprise, but yeah, I noticed.
Yeah, because I like the Montreal landmarks, so I threw a few of them in there. In my other story that's not related to Big Baby, I threw in the Olympic Stadium as well. They're on another planet. It's like a sci-fi building. But yeah, so she's also, like I said, she's a pretty powerful character as well, in comparable to Big Baby, actually.
Is it like a sidekick to Big Baby?
Oh, no, she's no sidekick.
No. She's...
No, she's, I mean, when I introduced her, that's kind of like I said, like, as you move along, more elements get fleshed out and more ideas and stuff. And she, like, as the story kind of gets a bit deeper, because I never really explained how Big Baby, like, I explained how the concept works of the alter ego and he comes out of him, but like, where does he really come from? What are his origins and things? He doesn't really know. So she shows up and she kind of knows things about them, herself, and him that he doesn't know about himself, right? So she has kind of some knowledge that she can help him learn a bit more about his origins. Like, why does the main character have this ability to have this giant muscular baby come out of him and destroy things?
Okay.
As the series moves along, Big Baby becomes a little less violent. He becomes a little more likable. I'll be honest.
Likable by
just
the public.
Not quite as hyper violent.
Because of the feminine energy that came in.
It's maybe that's part of it, definitely. Yeah. Because it got like where maybe the first few issues, like I said, are more parody and just joking around and having fun. There are some later issues where I delve a little more into the psychology of the two characters and stuff. And issue 9, that first story that I did was 24 pages. That whole issue is basically a mushroom trip where, the main character takes the mushrooms off camera. Like, you don't see it. The first page, you just see them, both of them, right? A Big Baby and the main character, his name is Matthew, just to not have the same name. And they're flying on a giant bird, and they're kind of flying through this weird landscape. And Big Baby's like, where are we? And he's like, how are we separated? Because usually that's not how it works. And then that's where he tells him, well, I just ate a massive dose of mushrooms. And when you turn the next page, you see them both lying in my bed here at home, but like surrounded by space, And there's like Pink Floyd lyrics in the background, and, then they go into their relationship. So then I start developing the characters a bit more, right?
Yeah, that's actually all your stories sounds way too deep.
I mean, maybe I'm making it sound deeper than it is, so don't, it's still kind of a fun, freaky issue. And like I said, because it's a psychedelic trip, it allowed me to draw some crazy stuff. There's a part where the main character kind of becomes like a giant spider creature, and then Big Baby even kind of mutates into like a half man, half bull. It's it's pretty out there.
Right. Well, that's cool. And do you often get your feedback from? And how do you, if you get some, how do you...
Yeah. So I would say I would love more, obviously. Again, it's kind of a solitary thing where maybe I feel the people are a bit shy about kind of giving feedback. But I have had over the last few years, like, some people who read will write back to me, and because I always encourage them, I tell them, let me know what you think, So I've had a few people over the years who write back. I had a kind of comic book journalist actually write back to me and give me a really good, fairly in-depth critique, which I appreciated. Most of the people, like, I have a small mailing list, right, for Big Baby. So I have people who just discovered it that I didn't know. I have friends who kind of buy it regularly when it comes out. So I've had feedback from some of my friends that know me. So they're like, oh my God, okay, when I read this part, I was like, oh, that's so Max, like, I get it, And then just feedback on the art and the story from people that I don't know. And generally it's been pretty positive. I think a lot of people kind of respect the work and effort that goes into it.
Yeah, because it's, yeah, for sure, like it's a lot of efforts. Everything you need to do on your own, and yourself as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. So like, Big Baby is completely made at home. So I bought a really good black and white laser printer.
Printer.
I've got my scanner to scan the artwork, and I literally print, fold, staple, and trim each comic for Big Baby. Again, that was to make it easy to be able to do it just by myself at the beginning and to understand the process really properly, so that when I do get stuff printed, I know how that works. So they can't, not that anyone's trying out to get you or anything, but sometimes you can forget certain details and you get the book back and you're like, oh. So I was pretty well prepared for when because I did end up, after Big Baby, I took a break. I did a one-shot story, and it's this one here. That's a little bit different. This is like just one story, 32 pages, and that's a female character as well. And this one I got printed at a digital printer, well, through the internet at a digital printer that's near Toronto. But they did a pretty good job. I'm pretty happy with it. It's got a slightly thicker kind of cardstock cover, and it's got a glossy paper on the inside, so that it's a little more proper, I guess is how I describe it. So that's, you can see that's the character here. And this one was fun as well because I'll show you just a few pages where it gets a little crazy there. So here she's growing and she's huge. Here it gets pretty cosmic. She's flying through space. And then this is pretty much, is it this one? Yeah, this is one of my favorites where I just kind of did one of my favorite double pages there.
Oh, no.
So she's kind of flying through space and time, right? So if you look close, you got like some planets, you got some aboriginals in their tents, you got some dinosaurs, some mammals, and then on this panel it's just all kind of warriors through history.
All right. So I said it right. It's deep.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, this is just an artistic opportunity to draw a lot of fun stuff, like, because she's going through space and it's kind of there's a psychedelic aspect to it. You can get a little crazier with the layouts and the storytelling, right? Like something like this. Like, I always like when, it's almost like here you have kind of a standard bunch of panels, but she's overlapping all of them, so that kind of makes it a little bit different. And it also adds depth to the image. And like, sometimes I do something like this where you actually follow the character with her hair from, this panel to this panel to this panel. There's like a flow, and with the word balloons as well, right? Like everything is directing your eye, hopefully in the direction I'd like it to go.
Nice.
So
she has super... Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, so she has a superpower to travel time.
Oh, she's like... basically omnipotent. She's like a shorthand way, an American way of describing it would be kind of like a female Galactus.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, these are some of the pages where like here we're seeing like multiverse versions of her. Here she's like
multiverse.
Here she's like a cyborg robot lady. Here she's like under some mud. Here she's got dreads. Yeah, it was a chance to do something, like I said, different. I wanted to do something different from Big Baby and a little more kind of epic and cosmic,
Do you? Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Do you believe in multiverse?
I certainly will entertain the possibility. I think it makes sense. I know a lot of like quantum physics and science and hoity-toity big word stuff is moving in that direction. Where people used to kind of laugh at it. Now it seems to be a scientific possibility for sure. And listen, we're talking about comics, right? There's so many concepts, like the multiverse. The idea of a multiverse has been talked about in comic books since like the 50s, the 60s. Do you know what I mean? And like that's comic book stuff, But it seems like everything that's comic book stuff within 20 to 30 years becomes real. You know what I mean? Iron Man, for example, the military now, they've got tons of like prototypes for exoskeleton suits and like rocket boots to fly, and like this stuff is starting to actually exist. You know what I mean? So I'm always of the belief that everything we think is impossible eventually will be probable and possible.
Yeah.
So I think the
because
multiverse is the same thing. It's, you know,
yeah, so we believe whatever is not discovered yet by science, that's not possible. That's what we think.
yeah. Until
Right?
until we figure it out, it's magic.
Exactly. It is magic or it doesn't exist. It's
That's
false.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there are, I also believe that there's always a possibility. And you mentioned that in comics they were talking about multiverse since 50s. You know, there's some it's funny, but there are some scriptures, old scriptures in India, where like thousands of years old, where multiverse is mentioned over there. Not like in English, but the meaning is the same.
Sure. Yeah. The concept of it. Yeah, for sure. Listen,
Yeah.
I mean, all ancient scriptures, whether it's Christian, Hindu, or, you know, it can be interpreted in many different ways. And a lot of them, some people do say that a lot of it, you know, angels, maybe they were aliens from spaceships, and they just,
Of
people
course.
back then didn't know how to really describe it, so they called them angels, or you know what I mean? So
Right.
I'm open to a lot of possibility. You know what I mean? I'm open to a lot of ideas, and I'm willing to entertain them, at least till you can prove to me that they're not real. You know, like right now, you can't prove the multiverse exists, and you can't prove that it doesn't. So
It doesn't exist. Yeah. Same way, like hundreds of years before, people used to say Earth is flat, right? Everybody says, yeah, it is. It is. Now everybody knows it's a circle. It's round. It's round. Oval, actually.
sure, but even now we have people saying that it isn't. You know, so you know, there's always going to be that. Don't forget that you know, back in who was it who said, like, who went, he was put on trial for saying the Earth was round. Was it Galileo?
Galileo. Yeah.
It sounds like you're singing Queen. So back in the day, you have to imagine that, like, you know, round earthers were the people that people laughed at. You know what I mean? Like Galileo
Exactly.
and all them. Like everyone else, the majority were flat earthers, and they were like, "Oh, you stupid round earthers." You know. So it's funny how the world, you know, just changes and flips and then comes back
Circles,
full
yeah.
circle, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we should always have we should always have this thing that we should be open to things. There might be possibility.
Yeah, I would hope so, but you know, that's not the lot of all people, unfortunately.
Right.
So, you know, I
Yeah,
can't control
so-
that.
Of course. Yeah. So we can only control ourselves.
Yeah,
That's
basically, that's one of the only true things, right? Our own reactions and our own emotions. People can try to have influence on them, but ultimately we decide on how we react to things.
Right. So, what advice would you like to give for the aspiring comic creators looking to publish?
Well, listen, publishers aren't going to run after you, right? So you're going to, you know, most people who make it and eventually get a solid actual publisher to help them out, or that work for a big company, have proven themselves before by self-publishing, right? It's a lot like music and bands today. You have all the means, right, to record yourself and get your songs down and be on Spotify. So what have you done before we kind of jump in, is what most music publishing companies will ask bands. And in comic books, it's kind of the same, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to have a body of work to show those publishers if you want to get published. The only way you're going to do that is by, making comics. And before any publisher is going to help you out, the only route is self-publishing. But you know what I mean? It's the advantage that the means are cheap. It's paper, pencils, ink. It's not expensive to produce comics, right? Printing them is maybe a little more costly, but actually producing them is not expensive, and most people have the means to do it. So if you're interested in that, and let's say, you know, you want to make comics, but you're mostly just doing illustration and just pin-ups here and there, that's fine. But if you want to make comics, you got to make comics. You know, you got to put yourself under the kind of rules and the processes of making that comic, so you get better, not just at doing illustrations, but at doing a page with 12 different illustrations, and one's big and one's small. And, you know, you're going to encounter problems as, you know, if you draw a pinup, it's easy. You know, I'm going to draw a cool, muscular, you know, half-naked lady and a barbarian, and they're on top of a mountain, and there's an eagle flying in the back, and some dark clouds, you know, and it's easy to make that look cool if you're a fairly skilled artist, right? Nothing in that image is too hard. But when you're doing a comic and you've written a story and you get to a page and you're like, oh man, I have to draw this person picking up the phone while holding a baby. And then in the next panel, there's this point of view where I'm next to the lamp. Now I have to know how to draw a lamp. And, the set of keys that's on the table. That's the hard stuff, when you're making comics. Oh my God, I got to draw a car. Well, let me do a quick sketch of what I want that car to look like first. Crap, I draw cars really horribly. Let me go get a reference picture. That'll help out. That all takes time. And here's, a specific piece of advice for anyone making comic books. When you encounter one of those things that you're like, man, I've never drawn a guitar, shit, this is a challenge. Don't shy away from it. Draw it. It's probably not going to be your best guitar, but the next time you have to draw a guitar, it'll already be better. And eventually, if you have to draw guitars multiple times, you'll get really good at it, right? So the first time you encounter things, it's always going to be hard, but you get through it. Maybe it's not your best, but later on, you'll find even better tricks to draw that same thing. And as you keep drawing many different things, you'll get better drawing other things.
Right. So basically, don't run away from challenges.
Yeah.
But convert them to opportunities.
And use reference and life drawing for when you have to draw a living room. Look at your living room and, the couch is a bit crooked and there's a blanket lying on top of it, not just like a square couch that you kind of just drew a box that looks a little bit like a couch. Draw a stain on the couch, observation.
Right. Yeah. You need to have a super good observation, I guess.
It certainly helps. And it doesn't mean you have to draw realistically, but you start from that and then you can twist it to make it your own and stuff. If you have a more cartoony style, right? Things are warping a little bit more, and that's fine too. But it's always good to start from the actual object so you have a good sense of what it looks like, what it is from different angles, and then you can interpret it in your own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way. You can add multiple from your life stories, from your observations. You can create multiple different concepts of comics, right? Different characters
that's the thing too with comics is like, I do a certain type of comic that I appreciate and that I kind of like and that comes from me and my experiences and stuff. The next guy does something completely different. That's kind of what I like about comics is you have many different viewpoints and each of those viewpoints is very singular, very different one from another. You know what I mean? It's when you're reading something from an independent cartoonist who writes and draws and does their own thing, you're getting a very specific singular point of view, which we don't get a lot of anymore, especially when we talk about media and movies and TV shows. I find they all kind of feel the same and they're similar themes where, I'm more appreciative of older movies. One of my favorite filmmakers, Stanley Kubrick, right? And when you watch his movies, you feel his very singular point of view and his influence on the visuals and stuff, because he was a filmmaker who controlled every aspect of his movie. And then you can go into the 80s with I really like RoboCop. The gentleman who directed that is Paul Verhoeven. He's from Denmark, I believe, right? So his point of view is completely different from Stanley Kubrick's, but very singular as well. And even though he's making American movies, it's different from other American filmmakers because he's not American, because he's from Europe and he has that exterior point of view, and that's what makes it so singular as well, right? So different. So I appreciate stuff like that. So comics is a world where, unless you're only reading mainstream, Marvel, DC stuff, that's a given. Superhero stuff, and I'm not crapping on that stuff. If you enjoy it, that's fine. There's still some titles I'll pick up once in a while. There's a new Wolverine series by one of my favorite artists that just came out today that I want to look at, but I don't buy a lot of new comics. And if I do, it's indie creators who I mostly find out about through the internet, because again, I'm looking for that singular vision, something very different from other stuff. And again, one of the advantages of comics outside of the mainstream is that you have so much choice, right? And right now I've only just really mentioned American comics, independent comics. There's independent comics in Japan, there's independent comics in South America. It's worldwide, whether people know about it or not.
Right. And each one has different tastes, because they're coming from different backgrounds.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. You get a singular vision, something really different, something you've never considered. For example, there's this I'll try to make the story short, but there was this Japanese exchange student, I think it was in France years ago, maybe in the 90s, and he killed a woman and ate part of her. Like, you know, he's like a cannibal, right? And he was found out. He didn't really like he wasn't even, you know, slick about it, and he got found out and he went to court and stuff. But apparently he was the son of a Japanese diplomat or something. So basically what happened is they sent him back to Japan, and he was never actually punished. He never went to prison, and he ended up making a comic book about his cannibal adventures. So, you know, not agreeing with his viewpoint or anything, but I have to say I'm very curious to see this comic book. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the curiosity of it. Again, I'm not condoning murdering women and eating them. That's obviously not what I'm saying. You know, we talked about this earlier, but for me to be able to get into the mind of someone so singular and different from myself, and something I've never really could even consider, and I'm sure reading that, again, not condoning what he does, I would learn a ton of things about maybe Japanese culture, about this guy specifically, you know what I mean? So I'm very much interested in reading stuff like that and enjoying it to a certain extent intellectually, while not condoning what's in the subject matter. I'm open to looking at that stuff. I'm not just closed to it.
Right. Yeah. So if you can be any character in real life, which one?
Man, that's a tough one. I guess, you know, if we're talking about, like, especially superheroes, obviously, you know, the aspect that's interesting is to be stronger, to be faster, to be able to fly and all these things. I mean, Superman all around kind of has, you know, all the best powers, I guess you could say. Because, like, have you seen Watchmen?
Watchman? No.
Yeah. Okay. So it's this comic where I won't go too much into detail, but there's only one character who's actually a superhero or has powers, but he's like omnipotent. He can see the future. He can see the past. He can break down molecular anatomy. He can, you know, turn ice cream into a pickle. Like, it's a stupid example, but like he sees all, and he's omnipotent, right? But he's very lonely because he doesn't, you know. And he starts to explain how a human has as many atoms as this other thing, and to me there's no difference, you know. Like, he doesn't see a difference. He's kind of lost his humanity, and I feel like if, you know, we had these powers, I think some of that would probably happen. You know what I mean? It's great to think of Superman with all that power of still being the nice guy who's, you know, not going to take the violent way out because he doesn't have to really. But, you know, Superman, you know, at any moment could just punch a finger through someone's head if he wanted to. You know what I mean? And I think if we had superpowers like that, it would be a little bit more like The Boys. You've seen the TV show The Boys?
Yeah.
And there's a comic that came out before that that it's based on that's really excellent as well. The writer who writes that doesn't like superheroes, and you can kind of tell, and that's why he comes up with the subject matter, but it's very entertaining. But yeah, I think that idea that, like, you know, if someone had powers, when you're a kid, you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to, you know, my answer is Superman. That's my answer, right? But that's as a kid, right? Like, when I was a kid, I still had it here at home. I had a Superman t-shirt and a red Superman cape that my parents bought me, and I would run through the park with it, right? So for sure, Superman. But as an adult, and you learn about the world and how people are and stuff like that, I feel that, you know, it would be very tough for someone to be very noble with these powers, right? Maybe you would start off that way, but eventually, you know, I think people might, just like celebrities, they might thinking they're better than other people, you know. I think it would lead to something like that. And not all celebrities are like that, obviously, but, you know, I definitely think there would be that aspect to it. I think The Boys kind of presents it. It's very exaggerated and still entertainment, but it's a good represenation of that.
All the power.
The power would corrupt, or most people it would corrupt. Yeah,
like with power comes responsibility. That's what he said,
the
right?
Spider-Man line.
Spider-Man.
Which is, you know, that's what I mean. Maybe, you know, Spider-Man's a little bit more believable, where he's not, his powers aren't so high level, you know what I mean? So maybe he is a little bit more human, even though he can jump around and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we'll go with Superman. Superman's powers. I'd like to be able to fly. That would be the one power.
That's gonna be amazing. Yeah. Until unless you don't find kryptonite anywhere near you, then
exactly. Yeah. But that seems like to me the most interesting superpower. You know, being super strong and stuff must be fun, but just to be able to fly under your own power, that would be pretty cool.
Right. Freedom.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
ultimate. Yeah, you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. That'd be crazy.
has it impacted your life or your
Sure,
personal
yeah.
growth?
I mean, it's the. I think anything that you do with discipline, even though it's hard in the moment, pays off because when you see the results and stuff, it's very satisfying.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people who don't bring projects to term get kind of depressed, I think, because of that. Thank you. So doing something that's hard, working on a project like that, and bringing it to term always helps your self confidence, and by default, then your personal growth as well. Because you don't want to be egotistical and too confident, but you need a certain level of confidence in the things that you do in your life. And I just believe in the idea that doing things that are hard pays off, and having discipline, and going to the gym, like we talked about. Some mornings you're fine and you want to go, and other mornings like, bah, I just want to stay in bed and whatever. But you still give yourself a little kick in the ass to go. And most times when you go to the gym, do that and come back, you probably feel better than if you'd stayed in bed and woken up and thought, oh man, I didn't go to the gym, I'm such a lazy bum. And then you get down on yourself and whatever. So it's I've just learned that doing something hard will always make you feel better once it's done. Whether I feel like it in the moment before I do it, I've learned to push past that a little bit, and just kind of those two voices in your head. That my other voice just tells that one to shut up and get to work, and have the discipline and the constants. And that's the only way most projects get brought to term anyways, right? Like you talked a little bit about me being a drummer and having musical projects. Those musical projects work the exact same way. It's incremental, it's bit by bit. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, but eventually when you hit that goal, you feel better about yourself than if you had done nothing, right?
Exactly. That makes total sense. Yeah, we have that little voice in our heads. Oh, don't skip today. Don't go to gym if you're tired. But yeah, we have to take the and do what is right for us.
Not to get too philosophical, metaphorical, or even specifically religious, but most of the major religions and philosophies talk about positive, negative, demons and angels, good, bad. We all philosophies, all religions have this concept, right? So we have those two voices. Let's just call it the positive and the negative, right? Like everything is kind of binary generally in the world. Well, we're binary in our heads. So sometimes the positive voice is telling us, yeah, you can do it, and, move on. And then the negative voice, just, stay in bed, or just, pick your nose, don't shower, or whatever. We decide which voice we're going to listen to. Ultimately, we have that choice, right? Sometimes we don't make the right choice, but we do have that choice.
Right, exactly. So what piece of advice you will give to someone who just starting out?
Stick with it and start small. I guess that would be you know what I mean? We all have that epic story we want to tell. That's fine. You'll have time later on to do that. Build up the experience of actually making comics by doing something a little maybe smaller scale, and not a 120 page comic, maybe just like I did, like start with a 4-page story, a 6-page story, and just kind of build up to it. That being said, though, that's my advice. I have a friend, an American comic creator who also does videos on YouTube. He kind of inspired me to move on and do my own YouTube videos and comic book reviews. But he's been working for the last few years on a He-Man bootleg story, right? And I thought it was just one book that he was working on. I'd seen draw pages and stuff. And I wrote to him and I'm like, I'd like to get your book. And he's like, well, he's like, I've got 5 already done, and this is the 6th one that I'm working on. And all these books are like 100 something pages. Like, yeah, it's crazy to me how productive he is. So, who's to say? In comics, that was my way, the way I explained. His way is different than mine, and he's been very productive as well. So it's like, just do it. You have to be drawing pages, you have to be working on story. So whether you start with a small story or a long story, you got to stick with it. It's like anything. I just think it's a good idea to start small and build up to it. That was my way. Like I said, I started with 12 pages, moved to 24. I've gone up now to 32 and even 34 with one of my big baby comics. So like I said, my next goal is 48. And after that, you just multiply that a few times and you can get to 100 odd pages. My big baby, if you add them all up, I think it's 204 pages. Once I figured that out, I was like, wow, I drew a lot of pages, right?
That's impressive. Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about that when I was drawing that first page, right? But then when I got to the end and just took the time to count, I'm like 204 pages. That's pretty crazy.
So you took baby steps to create Big Baby.
Yes. Bada boom. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we are done with the questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
If I could do some shameless self promotion. So
Yeah.
for my comics and my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel I do I started kind of as a helping marketing tool to sell my comics as well. So what I do is comic book reviews of some of my favorite comic books when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, 90s comics, a specific batch of kind of artists that I enjoy. And I just every day put out a daily video where I review a specific comic book, somewhere around 15-20 minutes for each video. So if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, check me out. It's on King Comics 2021. That's my channel. Subscribe if you like that kind of stuff. And the comic books, you can check out kingcomics.ca and write to me, and we can definitely work out some sort of distribution system to get those comics to you.
Yeah, I'll put your YouTube link and as well as your website link in the description.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Max, for coming. I'm sure like whoever is watching you, he's gonna be super inspired. He's gonna be disciplined. He's gonna be creative. He's gonna learn how to take baby steps and to be where you are right now. So thanks for sharing.
Not a problem. I appreciate you inviting me, and it was a fun time to talk, fun hour. Thank you for that. I actually went a little bit over an hour, so I got a lot of material. Yeah, no, it was really fun, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too, man. I'll see you in the gym.
Yeah, take care. Yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Take it easy.